All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and around the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited to welcome Yemi Penn today. Welcome, Yemi.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I just love how you describe yourself and the title. I love it. So excited to be here.
Oh, well, I'm thrilled. I've been looking forward to this conversation and to meeting you. I know that we're going to have a lot of fun and share a lot of value with the listeners today. You've got a lot of phenomenal experience to share. So, for those of you that don't know Yemi, this is the short version. But you'll learn, stick around for the conversation and you'll learn some of the rest. Yemi Penn is an author, documentary producer, speaker, engineer, and all-around fearless thought leader on creating your own memo. A serial entrepreneur with businesses in Sydney, London, and the US, Yemi is working tirelessly to raise the vibration of acknowledging and healing our individual and therefore our collective trauma. Yemi instigates us all to use our trauma as a catalyst for transformation and growth. Yemi, I know that is like, I don't know what that is. 2 sentences, the 3-sentence version. We can't possibly capture all of you in an introduction, but I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And that is enough. I don't think I want any more. I'm tired of the long bios, which,
Right.
are great with their labels, but I'm happy with that. I feel purposeful when I hear that.
Good. Oh, good. Well, yeah, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. I always love hearing people's origin stories especially as it relates to entrepreneurship, right? Because that's who we're talking to. Do you want to
Yeah.
share with us a little bit about your roots into the path of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it in my first book because sometimes I forget and think, oh, I just became 18 and started doing stuff. But I think I would have seen tidbits. My mum, when we lived in Nigeria in parts of the 90s, 80s and 90s, she used to make like kids, back in the day, well, I don't know if you remember, but you had these kind of Pampers that were washable, like the stuff for kids. She used to make that, then school uniform. So there was something in there. She never did the teaching, but there was something in there that made me think, oh, you can be the person who makes things for other people. And then similarly, my
Mm-hmm.
dad would go on business. He was a lawyer actually, and he would have his own legal firm, which he took over from his dad. So once again, it was this theory of, oh, they kind of worked for themselves, but they never really spoke about it as a choice. It was just education, education. But I think I started to have my own desire when I started university, and myself and these 3 boys, we called ourselves Black Aces based on the cards and nothing else, believe it or not. And we just did raves. We did parties that university students would go to. And then there was this kind of, it was the sense of achievement. It was, how can we just have an idea, find a venue, and then we decided to hold an event show, like a fashion show, talent show. And we spoke about sponsorship. And I remember going to pitch to a really wealthy man who owned a number of businesses in the UK. And I could not believe it when he firstly said yes, he would have a meeting with us. And secondly, said yes, he'd sponsor the event. That was when I realized, you've just got to show up. And when you show up and you take a risk, and that honestly was the beginning. Since then, I opened up a little fitness franchise for kids when I had my daughter. And then when I came to Australia, it was after healing some unresolved stuff, it was game open. It started my consultancy engineering. Then I opened a gym in London. Then I wrote a book. Then it just started really fast. But I have to acknowledge the stuff at the beginning that was part of it. But it just happened really fast in the past 6-7 years where it became bigger.
Yeah. Well, it's, those early seeds, and I think they happen in different ways in life, but I love you just observing your parents like, oh, you can do your own thing. And,
Yes.
and I think showing up and just taking the risk is so much of being in the game.
Yes.
I remember my dad in real estate and business saying, just making the choice and sometimes just being in the right place at the right time is
Mm,
right, is it is the game. And it's, I
yes.
think it's really easy for us to think, because at times, I mean, let's be clear that, business is not an easy path most of the
Mm,
time. I mean, I think it can be enjoyable, but there's always the next challenge, the next phase of growth, responding to market conditions or a change in demand in the marketplace or whatever, right? It
yes.
can be complicated. And yet, the important part is showing up, being willing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
participate, to
Mm.
respond, to maneuver.
Even as you say that, I can feel my body, because I've just, like, I know I've got to show up. I've just done a
Mhm.
major event where the opportunities afterwards are huge.
Mhm.
But in order for this to continue, it's to show up, and I'm listening to all the chatter, and that's a lot to do with being in business and entrepreneurship, is learning to manage the chatter. Because when you are an employee for someone else, you kind of hand over that responsibility to someone else.
Mhm.
When you work for yourself, you're in business or partnership, and so you have to deal with the belief systems that, in my mind, are just talking a whole heap of nonsense, but you've really got to manage it.
Mm.
So yeah, it's no, I couldn't agree more. It's managing the risk. That's a big part for me as well.
Yeah, it's so true. Obviously, in reading about you, hearing, a little bit about your background, you have some experience with and now help teach others on the topic of trauma. Do you
Mm,
want to share a little bit about your personal story and why that has been a theme for you, and how you either have or are transforming that for yourself and
yeah,
others?
it's a good question, but I probably want to segue it, because I'm sure some people will be thinking, what? We're talking about business and now about trauma.
Mhm.
I think there's a really big link. I just want to highlight that.
Mhm.
And I kind of glazed over it, because when I relocated to Australia from the UK about 8 years ago, it was for healing. It was healing unresolved trauma.
Mhm.
But in the resolution of which is ongoing was when I
Mhm.
kind of cracked open my creativity to for my version of true entrepreneurship, for my version of true badassery, as I'd like to say. And so that's the link I want to put. And I actually think a number of leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs could do well from looking at it, even though it's scary. They probably think it's scarier than business, but I think it makes a big difference to how business continues. Everyone's got a story. My particular story that I think was relevant to me at the time and remains the pinnacle point of my work was as a child losing my power, my sexual power in particular, where a close family member had abused his. And that the memory I have there is somewhere around the ages of 7, 8, possibly slightly younger. But it was probably a big reason why I moved to Australia. It was just too close to home when I was in London. And it didn't make sense to other people, but I just knew I needed to leave. My daughter was
Mhm.
7 years old. My son was 7 months. I was on the brink of a divorce, and it was just, life was just a bit messy, not the way I wanted it to be. And once I finally kind of settled into the job, it was then a case of, okay, what should we start doing? And I couldn't afford anything. Like I was very blessed to have a great job, but I couldn't afford to do therapy.
Mm.
I couldn't afford to get 3 plane tickets to go back to the UK, or visit my son's dad in the US. Um, but finding another way to just start looking at my trauma, which for me was talk therapy at the time, was finding students who were still learning to become psychologists and pay a reduced fee of $20 per hour. And
Mm.
it was the best $20. And there's always a way, always a
Mhm.
way. And even though my psychologist barely spoke, it was just me speaking. She was asking questions that were allowing me to unpack things. And that was the beginning for me, the beginning of, there's something here, I should look into it. Um, and the journey, yeah, it literally cracked. And I think the crack is where people feel the pain, because it cracked me open. But my goodness, I filled up those cracks with like golden threads, basically, which has had a lot to do with, yeah, my ability and audacity to open businesses.
Mhm. Well, and I've spoken regularly with guests on this podcast about our potential and our growth in our business essentially being limited by the capacity that we hold in our personal growth, right?
Yes.
And so I
Yeah.
think it's super relevant,
Yeah.
anything that is impacting our mindset, our mental health, our spirituality, like whatever you want to label it, like that's the work to be done,
Yeah.
really, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that you've connected that with personal growth. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm sheltered or in this echo chamber in Australia. I'm just not sure whether the corporate and entrepreneurial world have picked that up yet.
Mm.
That the further you build in your personal development and growth, it's like directly linked to the potential exponential or deepening of the work you do. I'm not sure. I don't know whether the past 2 years is an invitation for people to look into that, but we are going to need radical change. The world changes again, cost of living goes up. It's just,
Mm.
we need to start having some deep conversations as people, not necessarily as governments, but I think as people. But I'm already
Mhm.
going on a different tangent here, but
No,
I'm with you.
yeah, it is super relevant. I think anytime we reach, let's just call it a ceiling of any kind, right?
Mm,
Even for employees like in sales or marketing. I look at my sister who's in sales, and I've regularly talked about some of her experiences just because we're so close on the
mm,
podcast. It's, there are always those opportunities to reflect inwards
yes.
on what are we telling ourselves? How is this impacting my performance or my ability to connect with the right people? And I think it's super relevant to the entrepreneurs that are building small businesses, especially those that are heavily self-reliant, meaning that,
Mm,
they don't have maybe necessarily outside funding or automatic teams built in. They have to build all of that from the ground up. I think we're
yeah.
constantly met with our own limitations,
Yes.
whether it's in regards to building a team, or if we're the one initially having the sales conversation or doing the enrollment, right? I think it becomes readily apparent, I fairly quickly on in an entrepreneurial journey, but that might be my own reflection. And yet I
Mm,
do think whether people label it that way, they very quickly start to recognize like, ooh, have an opportunity to work on things like mindset and language and how I speak to myself and what beliefs I hold about myself or my business or the work, right?
mm. Yeah. No, I think you're I think you're right. There is a lot. It's almost like a prerequisite. If you want to go into business, get really good at that introspection, get really good at checking yourself. Like that has to be it. Because I think when I do keynotes and I speak, that's what people are really interested in. And it's not, I don't want to scare them. I felt like I was scared off when I looked at the definition. It was entrepreneurship was about taking risk, but it never really said the potential opportunities that
Mm,
work is needed, but
yeah.
definitely introspection would go along. Like for me, when I had my gym, I mean, I've now sold it. Um, I was really concerned about selling it. And it turned out through introspection and a conversation with my coach at the time that I was scared if I sold it, I lost my identity because I was still linking my worth to that. And to go even deeper, I'd managed to convince myself that that was just a fluke that I was able to open that business. I might not be able to do that again. It was just, I couldn't believe that that was even in my psyche. But I had to
Mm,
stop and really look deep inside. And yeah, having an
mm,
exit strategy is really important for me as a business owner. So
mhm.
I've eventually come to peace with that.
Yeah. Well, I joke with people about, an analogy that like in business, especially if we're bringing other people into the business, we don't often start a business looking at how we're going to wrap it up,
I
right?
know.
Just like we don't jump into a marriage thinking like, how
Relationship.
are we
Yep.
going to get divorced? People just don't plan for that. And yet
Yes.
with a business, it is inevitable. Like it
Yes.
is at some point that business will come to a conclusion, or your role in that business will come to a
Yeah.
conclusion, right? And so
Yeah.
it is a
Absolutely.
super important thing to be thinking about. And I have a friend who I interviewed not too long ago on the podcast. He runs a kind of a marketing Infusionsoft type of company. And that's the primary tool they use. But he talks
Mm,
about having what's called a return document, which is like a way of approaching and documenting, why am I building this business? What is it doing for me? Right?
mm,
How does it fit into my life? Because
mm.
we so often are fitting our lives around the business.
So good. Oh,
right?
a
Yeah. And
return
a
document, did you call
return,
it?
yes, that's what he calls it,
Mm.
is the return. And so he says, whenever you're facing challenges in your business, go visit the return so that you are
Mm.
constantly connecting with what is the purpose of that business in your life, because it can't be the only thing. It can't be, the reason that you're doing everything else. It has to feed your life. It has to support your life. And I think so often
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs, we can get that a little bit backwards. We start to shape our lives around our business.
Oh, so good. So good. You know what? Because I mean, some people say your why, but I love the fact that this has been put in terms of business, your return document.
Mhm.
Because sometimes I do, like you were saying, being there at the right place at the right time. Sometimes I lose focus and I'm like, just go for this because this is where the money will come. But does it relate to my return document? Okay.
Right. Yeah. What is
Thank you,
the
friend.
return? Absolutely. What is the return to you? What is the return that
Mm,
your business brings to you? I want to
yes.
backtrack a little bit because I know people are going to hear you talk and they're just going to think, oh my gosh, she's got, businesses on different continents and all of the success that you've created and you've written books. But I know that, there was a piece of your story, having read more than what can be shared in your intro, where, you were experiencing homelessness, right?
Mm,
Do you want, because
mm,
I think so often, and one of the things, not that I like to focus on all the hard stuff, but I want people to see the hard stuff in context, and not,
yeah.
because so often all we see is where people end up, right? Where they arrive
Yeah.
to and the successes that they've created. You'd share just a little bit about that time and how you made the first step to move beyond experiencing homelessness.
And I appreciate you putting that kind of prelude, which is not, some people wonder, well, why do you keep on talking about stuff? But it's to also give hope to those who think that there's only one way. And
Yeah.
it's also kind of grounding for me on the premise. It's not just, glorifying it, to remember where I've come from,
Mm,
because who knows, Heather, I might be in, who knows? You never know if you might be in that. And I want to remember the resilience that I took. So this
mm,
particular incident, when I share it, it doesn't hold the weight I think it probably would give people who hear the story on the other side. I had finished my degree and I started working. And Heather, my goodness, I thought, what the is this? Is this what we
mm,
sign up for? We study, and then just go into work and almost do more hours? I was really confused.
mm.
And at this point, I'd had a boyfriend. And I remember thinking, surely the next thing is get pregnant. We didn't speak about marriage because, in this weird way, we thought we were too young to be married, but not too young to have a kid. I didn't get the memo. Like, really, we really had the dialogue. I don't even say this is a joke. We really had the dialogue, and it was, let's have the kid first. And I fell pregnant, and I think both families weren't happy because we weren't willing
Mm,
to get married, and we didn't want it to be rushed. And it got to that point, as close as I was with my family, and I still lived at home having graduated. My mum gave us a couple of months to make the decision to get married, or I'd have to move out. And my partner at the time didn't have the ability to house me. He was in a shared house. um,
mm,
and it got to that really tricky point after staying on sofas of people's houses, lounge rooms. I had to register myself homeless and actually be on the steps of the what we call the council, where they needed to house me in a halfway house, for want of a better word.
mm,
Um, and I think that was when I hit. There was a bit of rock bottom. Once again, when some deep subconscious work happens, but you don't even know
mm,
it's happening, or you go into fight or flight mode. Mine was flight. I was definitely scared. I couldn't understand how 6, 7 months I was here sitting on this doorstep, just waiting for them to open up at 8 a.m., having been there through the night
mm,
in, definitely a suburb you don't want to be out on the street at
mm,
night at. And that was probably, yeah, and that's probably my homeless journey, because even then I got put in this halfway house that I really didn't want to sleep in.
mhm,
Whether it would seem rodents or knowing damn well people were having conversations about, exchange of money and drugs. It
mm,
just it wasn't the story I wanted to tell.
mm,
Um, However, honestly, it's been a big catalyst. When you figure out where you don't want to be, you tend to figure out where you want to be, and that's where my
mm.
focus has been. So a big part of my journey.
Yeah. Well, that contrast, I think sometimes it's human nature, right? That we don't get really clear on where we want to
Yeah,
go until we experience a bit of pain about what we don't want to experience, whether it's,
correct.
with your situation and, experiencing homelessness, whether it's with our health. I think so many
Yeah,
people end up compromising their health until they have experiences that give them a tremendous amount of clarity about what they want to work towards rather than just avoid.
yes, yes,
But there's
absolutely.
yeah, you just highlight the power in that, right? That it can be a
Mm,
massively motivating factor and that it was for you.
mm, yeah.
Um, what, like looking at where you are now, are you able to highlight for us maybe two or three, like what you consider really pivotal experiences in your journey?
My life journey or entrepreneurial journey?
Well, let's start with the entrepreneur journey.
Mm. One pivotal one would be when I had my daughter, 2007.
Mm,
I wanted to go into schools and teach fitness. And what was really pivotal is that I did my first ever cold call, which even today still gives me shivers. But I think it's a big part potentially of sales. I don't know. I don't know
mhm.
how much sales and marketing has changed. I think I've managed to build my brand enough that I get the calls, but then I needed to do the call.
Yeah.
And it was the fact that what I was offering was needed.
Mm,
And there was this worthiness thing of, and I couldn't believe it. And then I employed my first person. Like, I don't celebrate that. I don't celebrate that I had a 3-month-old who I don't even know where she was. I would have just found an auntie who looked after her while I went in to just do this class. And so I'd go into schools and just teach fitness to kids. That was really pivotal for me because
mhm,
I thought no one's taught me this. This wasn't taught in school. They didn't even mention it at university.
mm,
Everything seemed to be geared towards working for an employer, which
mm,
once again is not all bad. But my goodness, can we not sell it as the only way to be?
mm.
Like,
Ugh,
we can't. We just, and
no.
we shouldn't.
No, we shouldn't. It limits people who I think otherwise would have a chance. If somebody could help them pique their curiosity or build a little confidence, right, through some education. I had the
Yes.
same experience in law school, like completing law school and looking back and realizing people got funneled essentially out of all their ideas they came into law school with into like one of two options. You either go into law firm life, big law firm, medium law firm, small law firm, or government work. Like, there you go. There's your two options. Not, and I ended up launching my own practice right out of law school, but nobody
Did you?
teaches you how to do
Wow.
that. And none of us, I mean, I should speak for myself. Like, we're not just born with the knowledge of how to run a business, right? This is
Yeah.
something that takes some learning. And so I wish as well that our
Mm.
education system across the board did a better job of teaching about options.
Yeah, you do have me thinking though, because we're expecting teachers who are probably some of the most underpaid professions in most countries, potentially working heavily linked to some sort of government. So yeah, this
Yeah, the
the
system is,
system requires some real deep revolutionary work. But we
mm,
might be, this might be a mini oxymoron here, asking teachers to, but and I don't know, maybe this is where those of us who are doing it, we go back and
yeah,
we offer this extracurricular.
yep,
No, we're going against the grain, but I believe there'll be people in there. So that was a
mhm,
big one for me, that I
mm,
had this innate feeling that I could be selling something or offering something to someone. I think
mm,
the other one has probably been the past year and a half. I'm an engineer by profession, and that's what I came to Australia for, working on the railway. And I love elements of engineering, but it was doing
mm,
engineering in the corporate world that was just brutalizing my soul. Um, because sometimes it felt like people weren't interested in solutions, they were interested in finding more problems. And I
mm,
really have an abundance mindset. I think we've got so many problems in the world. Trust me, we can solve this one really quick so we can get on to the next problem. You really
Right.
don't need to create any more problems. And so that was when it became apparent for me to just step out from my engineering consultancy. And effectively, something I've only admitted, I think, in the past 2 weeks, is I'm now creating a whole new another arm of the business. Something I didn't go to university for, something teachers didn't like. There's no immediate certificate at the end of it. It's actually my life experiences and my degrees that I've had that validate me doing this, which is how can we get more people to show up authentically so that you can get an increase or have a healthier bottom line. So it's once again, I'm just almost taking this from air, but it feels good. And so far, my clients are getting the results they want. So that's huge for me as well, because I definitely didn't think that I could change profession just as I hit 40.
Right.
But I love the challenge.
Well, and there's something so refreshing to hear these stories about how people continue to evolve, both, personally, but in their careers. Because I think it's really easy for people to stay a little too stagnant for too long, right? Because of all the shoulds, like, oh, I should be doing this, and this is a good career, I shouldn't be leaving it. Like, my family would think I'm weird if I just left and did this big right turn and did my own thing. But some of my very favorite clients are actually people who have left a corporate job or a big career, and they're launching their own thing because they are following their heart's desire and doing what they're really called to do. And I think that's the genius of entrepreneurship, is listening to that voice, matching it with a marketplace in a way that creates value, like you're experiencing now with the work that you're doing. That, it's like that Steve Jobs quote that I've referenced several times about, like, you can never connect the dots looking forward, but they always connect looking backwards. Right?
Like, so I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, you're now just sitting here like, I never would have expected to be here. And of course, it's the perfect expression of who you are in this time and the work that that needs to be done and that your clients need you to do.
Oh, that was so good, what you just shared, everything. So I have these things called downloads, as I call them, which is just this thinking. And this is why I really am always grateful for the platform to speak on podcasts. So thank you. Because I remember who I am. I remember what I'm capable of. Because sometimes you forget, sometimes you think you're just flowing through. But you did that and you can do it again in a different capacity. Beautiful.
Well, and how fun that we get to do this. Like, how fun that we get to remember that at any phase in our career, we can make a turn, we can adjust course or make a change, small change, big change, right? Sometimes it doesn't take much. I have a mentor who I worked with really early on in my law career, and he was really unique because he was super creative within the law, which you don't often see, that level of like openness and creativity. And so he was always willing to take a left turn or a right turn or look at something in a new way. And we actually chatted just the other day. He's probably in his late 70s now, maybe 78. Oh, wow. And he wants to come back into like the full-time practice of law because he's having so much fun doing social justice work. Like, he went and put himself through courses teaching himself immigration work and like areas of law he'd never touched before. Wow. And I just like, it lit me up so much to think of people like this, that like, no matter the age, no matter where they continue to seek out those experiences, right, that allow them to create value and grow as a person and serve others. And that to me is like 100% the joy of entrepreneurship.
I got goosebumps as you shared that. And I really hope that that is me. I really hope. And it really is, I call this memo how we're meant to live life. I call it calling the memo on its head. We just turn it around. This theory that we work till 65 and we retire. If you are joyful about what you want to do, then go out there. And why are we waiting till we're 65 before we start enjoying life? When the bones have seized up a bit more? It's the biggest oxymoron. And I get it may have worked. Yes, I applaud those who did it, but my goodness, can we change it up now? Start living now and doing things we enjoy.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Talk about one more system that needs to change dramatically, right? My friend, I have a really close friend in the legal field who became a judge, and she's a few years older than me, but it's like a really significant thing for her at a,
Yeah.
relatively young age to be in this position, and really happy that she's there. And she's already looking at the folks that are retiring at whatever age, 62, 65. And she's like, Heather, the statistics are not good. These are people that have only done law like their entire career. And it's some terrible statistic around how many pass away within like 2 years of retiring.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so for me to have this concept of like retirement, like, heck
Yes.
no, I never want
Yes.
to officially
Mm.
retire anything. Like, I want to see it as transitioning into now doing the next thing. Like, what is the next thing? Right. Do that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts
Oh,
around that because we get it so wrong.
we have, and but you just said it. Let's look back at the dots and say, well, if people are retiring, having had one profession, one area for all these years, and we find that just in retirement they sadly go, what can we
Yes.
do differently? Where are we, like, who's writing the studies? I mean, we have media who reports on every sort of foolishness in the world. Can we not talk about this? Can we not talk about, hey, here's a different way to, or maybe it's a message to ourselves to write these articles and start
Yes.
inviting the conversation at a global level.
Yeah.
We can change it. We can change things up. I am, and will definitely, I'm sure, teach our children that they've got the
Mm.
choice.
Yes. Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. No, I love that. Um, so the work that you're currently doing now, you said, is the combination of some of your training, but also some of this personal experience and
Yeah.
transformation. Do you want to share what you are doing with your current clients?
So what I haven't put in my bio, which I need to update, I'm like 8 months into a PhD that
Oh,
I haven't
wow.
mentioned because I was very reluctant to study. And that was where I started making documentaries, because I thought, surely studying isn't the only way. I can
Mm,
create new knowledge through documentaries. And that's how I started. But then my thirst for more knowledge still came in the PhD. So I found the university saying, hey, can I write half a thesis and the other half is a documentary? And they said, yes. So this is my
wow.
point, and this is the beauty of the entrepreneurial brain, is that you could almost create anything. If it
Mhm.
starts in your mind, it's possible. Your task then is, how can you enroll other people into your vision? So I'm doing my PhD full time on the side, but that research is specifically on trauma. Can trauma be
Mm,
transformative? I'm
mm,
really interested in the transformative nature of trauma, considering I'm not convinced we can control everything. I know there are
yeah.
preventative strategists out there, but it's also about doing that work and showing up to either individuals or organizations or corporates. Like,
Mm,
we don't go in there, I don't go in there just focusing on the trauma. I just say, well, what problem are you having? And trust me, there's always a problem. I've just keynoted for 5 weeks to about over 3,000 people, middle
mm,
management in one of the big four accounting consultancies, PricewaterhouseCoopers. I hope I got that right. Um, and when I've gone on to the stage and shared, there's a waft of people afterwards who come in and lean in and say, I want to know more. They don't quite know why they want to know more, but there's a yearning, there's a desire that they haven't given language to. And that's part of my superpower, is saying, okay, how can we give
mm,
some language to this so that you feel a little bit more comfortable, either with the discomfort or what it is you want to do? Some of them don't know if they want to apply to become partner. Some of them don't know if they want to, start their own business. Some of them don't know if they need to go against the grain of what their parent thinks they should be doing. So that's kind of my work through my PhD. It's starting these really radical, honest conversations, and not trying to be anyone's guru or whatever, but just saying, look, just get really good at asking yourself questions and be really honest. And by the way, these are some things you can look into.
mm,
It doesn't have a name. I call myself a transformation thought leader.
mhm.
And that's enough for me. But most of the work links to some form of trauma,
Yeah.
of what happened. And if you started resolving that, you probably find the answers to a lot of your questions.
Well, this topic is so timely. I feel like all over, my social media, even amongst people that I talk with regularly, I hear people starting to investigate this topic where
Yeah.
it wasn't so out in the open before. And I'm actually currently reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is,
Features in my TED talk. Yes. Brilliant
yeah,
book.
right. But it's distressing and eye-opening to
Mm,
realize not only the extent, but like the sheer number of people walking around that
yes.
have experienced some form of pretty severe trauma. I mean, I think it kind of sent me down a rabbit hole over the weekend because I'm reading that book and I'm actually getting ready. I'm pretty open about my own journey and my own health journey. I'm actually flying to California in a couple of days to work specifically with a chiropractor who does energy work and healing around. But
Brilliant. Wow.
yes, his like the underlying premise of his work is that when you experience trauma of any kind, your mind and your spirit and your body fragment, right? And so his
Yeah.
goal is to get those parts reconnected and talking to each other
Mm,
in the right way so that we can reach optimal health. And he said people often find him because they've tried all these other methods, right? They've tried like whipping their body into shape or doing extreme dieting or meeting with doctors who just can't figure out what's going on, whether it's mentally, physically, combination. And so he kind of ends up being like a final stop for people that have just tried everything else. And,
wow.
and so when you think about, and it's certainly when I read that book, you actually see like right in front of you, the biological, physiological impacts of trauma to our brain, to our
Yes,
body systems, to our hormones, to our dopamine levels, everything impacts everything,
it does.
and our bodies are so brilliant at trying to like mask the pain
Yes.
or cope or help us continue to live and not have that experience again, that we just remain in fight or flight, or our systems
Yeah.
are super trigger happy, right? And so it's just, you know anyways, I'll spare going down the rabbit hole, just enough to say that it is significant. And I think pretty
Yeah.
much any of us in our work, when we're working with other humans, need to have some amount of knowledge about what this can do for people,
We
for
re-
our clients, right?
really do. I mean, if you want to call it rabbit hole introspection, you're doing the work to get you whatever quality of life is for you. But here's the other thing that I think I probably didn't summarize it as succinctly. My work now is, I appreciate we need to look at sustainability of the planet, but I
Mm,
think I'm not hearing enough people talk about sustainability of humanity, who are the custodians of the planet. It's just a really big, I hear and I see lots of TV shows. So David Attenborough, that does stuff around the world, you could see his language has changed in a number of his documentaries, because as he's talking about, we need to look after the planet, we need to do this, and absolutely right. But I'm like, but do you know who you're talking to? You're talking to people who are bleeding.
yeah.
You're talking to people who are walking around dead. And really, they don't even have the time. So while you're doing this great work, and naturally, I tell myself, when you find yourself finding a problem in society, you're either part of the problem or solution. And that's why I'm doing this work. So, okay, great, I'm with you. Let's sustain this planet. It's a gorgeous planet. We need to do better. But in the process, at the same time, let's sustain ourselves. Let's look at our trauma.
Yes.
Let's clean it. And I promise you, our priorities will be focused. Our
Mm,
priorities would not be trying to solve world hunger in different parts of the world. Our priorities will not just be about, can I make excess money so I can have 6 houses as opposed to 3? I'm not trying to shame any of this, but it would
mm-mm.
change. It would
Yes.
change.
Yes.
Um, so that's a big part of my work.
No,
Mm.
it's huge. And your point about like, do you know who you're talking to, right? I think so many people right now are literally just in survival mode. They
Yeah.
don't have the luxury to be in abundance mindset or to, and it's not to say that there's not steps they can't take to get there, but we do have to recognize, I think, when so frequently people are literally just in survival mode. We have to
Mm.
do things collectively that help get us out of survival into creativity, right? So much of the book that I've read is about how creativity shuts down in the
Yes.
face of trauma and following trauma. And
Yeah.
creativity is everything. It's everything. It's how we
Everything.
build, it's how we problem solve, it's how children look at an issue and decide, like, tomorrow this could be different because I have this idea. Like, it's
Yeah.
natural. And we shut it down when we experience trauma.
Yeah. Mm.
It's
Wow.
Yeah, all of this is to say the work that you're doing is super important, extraordinarily timely. I mean, it's been timely for years. Let's be clear that we've all needed the work for years, right? And I
Yeah.
think more and more, there's more language around it. There are more people that understand it, right? We can start to actually make progress.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. That was a deep dive we just did,
It
wasn't it? It
was,
was
I
good.
know. Well, it's relevant and it's a hard topic. I mean, one thing that I found I was looking at was like statistics, even on just one form of trauma, right? Family incest. The
Mm.
statistics from the Department of Justice in the United States is that 1 in 10 families are
Mm.
experiencing or inflicting 1 in 10
Mm.
have experienced or inflicting incest. And it's like, an incest
Mm.
has a broad definition, just meaning like any family member, including those through marriage or cousins, or right. But it's a
Yeah.
significant issue. And if we could eliminate the abuse to children, any form of abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, do you know that the prediction is that it would eliminate 75% of alcohol and drug abuse in the United States? Three
Oh my,
quarters. Yes.
was that a study you read, or what was that?
Yeah,
Oh wow.
I know it's massive. The impact to our economy is massive. The impact to our collective health is massive. And it's this also massively underreported crime, right? Families self-protect. Anyways, there's so much in there that felt like a gut punch, like a bomb just dropped. And yet it's like, this
Mm.
is what we've been living with.
Yeah.
So many people are experiencing trauma and they need help unpacking it and looking at it. Anyways,
Mm.
it's a lot.
Mm.
It's a
Mm.
really big topic.
It is.
So I mean, I love, first of all, that you are an engineer by training and that like you have expanded your career and your work and your voice and what you talk about into all, like you're creating documentaries and writing
I know.
books. And do you ever just like shake your head like, what? This is
I
me?
do. I do. And look, like you, yeah, like you say, you're off. Did you say California or San Francisco? I can't remember
Yeah,
which one.
I will be traveling. I live in Seattle, but I'll be traveling to
Okay.
California in a couple of days.
So the fact that you're moving, like you're physically moving to go see someone who can help with some sort of what I call integrative, recovery of
Yes.
some sort. I've been doing the same. And I remember, very alternative for me, I had someone read my numbers, or, and I didn't even know what any of that meant back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he said to me, which made so much sense. So whenever I freak myself out saying, Yemi, how have you done all these things? And you've done it with 2 kids on your own. And I don't do it to
Right.
just to gloat, but to really kind of remind myself of what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy who read my numbers said, oh, that's because you've been here before, honey, and you've done this before. And so you're so much faster at doing it because now you need to get to the real work. And that might be a lot for people, but these were things I never explored. And this is the creativity I'm talking about that we can unlock. I mean, when people go in and look more about me, they'll find out that the Yemi speaking now. I mean, I'm currently on Yemi version 11.3. Yeah, there was a Yemi version 4 who could not have this conversation.
Right.
Evolution
Right.
at its best.
Yes. No, it's so wonderful as a demonstration of what we're capable as
Yeah,
humans, right? What we're
yes,
capable of. Yeah,
yes.
it's so fun. Well, I would love to know, do you like to connect with people online? And if so, where? Where do you point people?
Is it funny? Does anyone ever say no? I don't like to connect
Right.
with people,
Yes.
but I do.
Yes.
Do they?
Yes. Yes, I just
Oh
talked
my
with a
god!
guy this morning on the podcast and he was like, no, like I'm not on any social media, and they can't connect to me directly. They have to go through my website. And I get it.
I
You
love
know,
that.
I
I
love
do.
it too. I love
I
that he
do.
was like so clear about it. Yes.
Yeah, oh bless him. Maybe I'll get there one day. But no, I do love connecting with people. I love hearing stories. For me, peer review is having conversation with people. It's a
Mm,
scientific term, peer review. And for me, peer review is just connected. So I'm on Instagram, yemi.penn, yemi.penn. And the same with my website, yemipenn.com. If you want to know what's going on all the different things I have been working on and new things that are coming up. You know, I am going to start, you know, we call it mastermind, but I want to call it something else, because I have a lot of people reach out to me, and I don't have the time for one-to-ones, but I do want to reach people in a different way. So the website's definitely a good spot for that. But Instagram is also really great, where I have this really open dialogue with people I've never met, that around the world, who just share a view. They say, yeah, this happened to me, this works for me. It's so community based. I love it. So yeah,
Right. Well, it
I'd
sounds
love
like
to meet people there.
yes, you need a membership or your own community, right?
I know, that's the next task, Heather.
Yes,
That's the things I've got to do. But yes,
yeah, well, it sounds like it's happening really naturally for you, right?
yeah,
As a
it's all good.
precursor. So at whatever time it's the right time, I think it will just be a natural next step kind of evolution for
Yeah,
you. Well,
good.
we are thrilled to share your links to your website and your social media and anything else that you want to share, books, whatever, at the show notes page. So if you're listening, hop over to legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast, where you can get to know some more about Yemi. Yemi, what final thoughts would you like to leave people with today? I know we've covered a lot, and I apologize for jumping around, but I just feel like there were so many things that you could speak to. Anything that
Yeah.
you wish we'd covered or that you want to share here at the end?
No, not that I wish we'd covered, because you're right, we did go all over. And this keeps on coming back to me. It's the title of a book by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown, which is You Are Your Best Thing. It keeps on coming to me even in my sleep and everything. And it's a reminder to myself, and maybe it's a reminder to others, like, genuinely, you are your best thing. We are our best thing. Any changes we want in the world, please just start with yourself. It's in there. This isn't grandiose. This isn't kumbaya. This is real. Let's stop waiting for other people. We are our best thing.
Oh, I love that. Such a powerful reminder. And also I think provides real clarity about where you should start, right? It
Yes,
seems so much more possible to do something inside yourself than it does to like change the world,
that's right.
right? Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Well, I love it. I so appreciate you. It's been such a joy to connect and hear a little bit more
Likewise.
about your story. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me.